Hi, everybody. This is Al. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States, at the Kelly Writers House, and I'm surrounded by friends. Here at the table to my far left, your right, is Lily Applebaum. Good evening, Lily.
Hello.
Hello. Boy, it's been a long day. We did a lot of stuff together, and you're just bright and chipper as ever.
Ready to go.
That's great. I like that attitude. Julia Block, do you feel similarly?
I'm chipper.
You're chipper too. Uh-oh, this is a theme.
Yep.
Carlos?
Is it my turn to say I'm chipper? I'm pretty chipper.
That was a meta comment. And Caroline has joined us. It's so good to see you. Can you move the mic real close to you, Caroline?
Yes.
Hello. Hi. Anna Strong? Say
Hello.
something. Here comes Zach turning the camera around on Anna.
Hello, I'm here on the
There's
phone.
Anna.
Call me, please.
Yes,
That's on.
215-573-9752, 215-573-9752. Anna Strong is standing by. So, and we have here in the Google Hangout, we have coming to us from Los Angeles, California, a relatively new but happy Angelina herself, Molly O'Neill. Hello, Molly.
Hello, Al. Hello, everyone.
Good 3 o'clock in the afternoon to you. And whoa, we have a dog. We have a dog. That dog thinks it's 6 o'clock and dinner time, but it's actually 3 o'clock. And there's Dave Poplar in Massachusetts. Hello, Dave.
Good evening.
Hello, how are you? And Amaris Kachansky from Cape Cod.
Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone. How you doing?
Great, good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
And I believe Allie Castleman is here from New York City. Hello, Allie. Allie, you want to mute your mic and say hello to us?
I think she's talking to somebody.
She's actually talking to someone else. Great! We're obviously her first priority. That's so great. And of course we have Zach and we have Chris. And I want Chris to grab the microphone from Anna and introduce a new tech support person who is fabulous and is learning. And Chris Martin gets to speak. Hello, Chris.
Hi, everybody.
Who is our new tech support person?
To be honest, Zach would be better at doing this introduction than I would.
Okay,
So,
Zach, grab
I think-
the microphone. This is crazy.
Hello. This is my lovely assistant, Ivana Kohut. She's a Wexler staff member. She's a sophomore here at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's learning on the job, on the spot.
That's
So,
great. Ivana,
that's great.
if everything breaks, we can blame you. But
Sounds
we
good.
won't. Thank you. Welcome to the ModPo family. And we have here in the room, we have Allison, who's come from one of the CTAs, who's come all the way from Happy Valley, Pennsylvania State Park. State College, did I say State Park? University Park, sorry. And she has brought a friend, Michelle. And we have CJ, and we have Kirby, and John, and Talia, and Mary, and Eric. And we have a couple people who just walked in the room whose names I don't have yet, but I will get them. And we have Gabe, who has got the portable mic. And we have a book that came in from Christine Coates, who sent this book to us from South Africa. Dear Al and all at Kelly Writers House, Poetry Across the Oceans, Christine Coates. You've probably seen her active in the forums. Thank you, Christine, for sending us this book, which Zach is flashing up. Sorry, it's called Homegrown, and we hope you will buy a copy from your local bookstore. All right, so one little shout-out or announcement before we get started, and that is, as many of you know, we have a second way of communicating with us. We have many ways of communicating with us. There's the 16th way of communicating with us. We have the special forums, so you go to live webcast sessions within the ModPo site. You click on that forum, and there are threads that we'll be checking throughout the webcast to pick up a couple of questions and comments. We have, of course, Twitter, so you can use the hashtag, which is hashtag ModPoLive. We also have the phone, 215-573-9752. And we also have our new ModPo voicemail, which is 512-95-ModPo. 512-95-ModPo. And I had written down somewhere the numerical translation of that, but I don't have it anymore, but it doesn't matter. You can figure that out on your phone. 512-95-ModPo. If you call that, you'll be recording a message that we will listen to either tonight or later. And I think Anna Strong and I are going to do an audio update. Maybe we can corral a few other people with us, maybe Julia or Lily or Carlos. Caroline, maybe, or maybe just the two of us, in which we'll listen to some of these audio voicemails and we'll respond. But I thought we'd just play one as a sample. We got about 8 or 9 of them, or 10 of them recently, and they're all really nice, asking particular questions, but also just saying hello. And so here's Deanna Ramirez. Are we ready for this, Chris? Here's a message we got from Deanna, just saying hello and how she feels about the course.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Al. My name is Diana Ramirez, and I'm just calling you to congratulate you guys. I'm so happy in this experience. This is my second year in ModPo, and English is my second language, and you guys have been helping me to improve every day, little by little, and I'm so grateful for that. I am also so happy that you create this. I mean, it makes me feel so homey. You guys are awesome. Congratulations again, and I can't wait to the next. It's tonight, right? Thursday at 6 p.m. and I'm working, but doesn't matter. I'm studying. See you later, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Isn't that great? Snaps for Deanna Ramirez. So Deanna is at work, but she said she's tuning in. I hope, Deanna, that the bosses don't see that you're watching, or maybe you're the boss, so that solves that problem. But hello, Deanna, and welcome to the ModPo family again, because this is your second year. And a couple of things, responses in Facebook to this. Karen Ledford, you guys, you pen guys, keep finding more and more ways to make 20,000 people feel like they're each individually important. Best class ever. Sophia Pandya, who's a poet who's up in the West Coast, who's originally from Pakistan. She's a poet who's been around ModPo, I think, all 4 years. Wow, this is so cool. ModPo keeps getting better and better. And Diana Ramirez Zarate says, every year this is coming more and more interesting and homey, close and close. There is no between walls or mending walls between us. So that's really great. So thank you all, 51295 ModPo, or more directly, 215-573-9752. Okay, so I thought I would just read one of our poems this week and go around and get some first comments while we're waiting for questions to come up. And I'm kind of randomly going through, and I'm thinking, how about County Cohen's Incident? You know, that's an amazing poem. Okay, I'll read it and then just... Gabe, would you give Allison the mic, just so Allison can take a first crack at this, and anybody else here at the table and in the Google Hangouts? Incident by County Cohen. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart-filled, head-filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me, in quotations in the poem, nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Allison, comments at all? Anything?
So this poem, when I first encountered it last year in ModPo, I have a really emotional reaction to it because of that word, and it really the
N-word,
yeah.
Which is not a surprise in terms of rhyme.
Sure, but still it's really, there's a lot of impact there, I think. And one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time doing in the forums this week is really comparing Stein to this other type of poetry and really saying, wow, how different these 2 weeks are, but how actually, if we spend enough time, we can really start to bring them together.
Wow. That's really incredible. No, that's really great. Lily, Julia, Allison is challenging us. I mean, I think we all want to accept this challenge, but she's challenging us to think about how the linguistic experiment of Stein is not so far off from the tools Cullen's using to say what he has to say.
You could say, I think, that both are doing some kind of riff on... Riff is too weak a word to describe what they're doing, way more intentionally than riff. Right. But some kind of relationship with either language for children or nursery rhymes. Like Stein, with her loving repeating, is often thought of children's you repeat words to children so that they remember them, and she's kind of putting more poetic work into that act. And Cullen is obviously, he's doing something different, but he's still working with the form of nursery rhymes and language for children, in that he's taken content that doesn't belong there and put it into that form.
Julia, your thought?
Yeah, those are both really subversive moves, because the language looks like something at first, and then once you spend more time with it, you realize it's doing something much different. It's upsetting all your expectations of what language is supposed to do, especially if it looks the way it looks in these pieces.
Yeah, Caroline.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that. It's actually a really good point, because actually both County Cullen and Gertrude Stein, Cullen has a few children's books. One of them, which he co-authored with his cat, one's called My 9 Lives and How I Lost Them. And he worked with he wanted to kind of convey some of the messages he wrote in his poetry, but put in children's form. But he felt like his poetic form couldn't necessarily convey them to the children, so he went and authored these children's books. So it's interesting that you kind of pick up that Stein has some children's books as well. So they have working with form in different ways, and that idea of that childlike sound coming together.
And this poem, of course, has a first-person speaker who is a child, being remembered by the poet, who obviously is not a child, who is using a form of child language, but still complicating it by it being inherently a looking back at a memory that's seared in the brain, in the speaker's brain. Amaris Kachansky, what about this rhyme? I mean, ModPo spends a lot of effort, a lot of our effort in the first week saying, we're getting past rhyme, we're not going to be constrained, we're trying for open forms. And then in week 5, at least at the beginning, with the communist poets and with the selection of Harlem Renaissance poets, of traditionalists in the sense of form, ModPo Plus, I hope everybody will look, complicates that story a lot. But in the selection of Cullen and McKay doing a sonnet, Cullen using a kind of a child's ballad, we have rhyme that's in the service of radical statements, content. What do we do with that apparent disconnection between form and content? Well, I mean, obviously, we know what to do. We've talked about it a lot, but what do you want to say at this moment about that?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of this poem by Cullen, I think it just makes his message all the more shocking. I mean, traditionally, that nursery form rhyme is used as an aid for memorization, to transmit a sort of moral within a parable for children. Usually something, quite harmless, sort of very everyday. And here we have that rhyme punctuated by this very harsh daily reality of a child understanding what his racial identity is and how it's perceived by the rest of the world. So he uses that very sort of sing-songy quatrain, set of 3 quatrains, which you would normally have a very, very different tone. And here it's a pretty heartbreaking message, so that remember it at the end is echoed by the form of his ballad.
That's really well put. And I know that I remember in our video, we focused on December Remember as a more memorable rhyme even than Bigger, quote-unquote, Nigger, because December Remember has that meta-poetic idea that the rhyme is a way to remember, and racist hatred is seared in your head the way an unforgettable rhyme is. So remember happens to be a memorable word, which is remember squared. Right? And I think that's the power of that. And so this is Baltimore. This is a really relevant poem. Erica Kaufman, we're talking about County Cullens. Hello, Erica Kaufman.
Hi, Al.
Yeah, you were teaching, and now you're here. This is cool, double teaching. We're talking about County Cullens incident. Does anybody, and those in the Google Hangouts can just signal by waving your hand that you have something to say, but anybody want to say something about the extra relevance of this poem? Baltimore, this is a town in this poem. It's a town of racist hatred that the speaker wasn't expecting. So we're reading this in 2015, and just the phrase "old Baltimore" is very, very resonant. Does anybody want to say? I mean, maybe it's an obvious thing about how the poem is relevant today, but Carlos, you want to riff on this at all? And keep the mic right next to you. Any thoughts about reading this as a young person in 2015?
Well, sure. There's been a whole lot of turbulence on this subject. I mean, there were the riots in Baltimore. I'm sure everybody is familiar with that. More than once, went on for a long time. There's also been the Black Lives Matter movement that started up recently. And so I think it's quite relevant, and I think it's quite relevant in its rhetoric. I mean, people talked about how, you know, it's in a nursery rhyme, and that's subverting this form. But I think, you know, in addition to that, it's also a play on that, you know, these harsh realities exist in a child's world as well. They're not just brought up in adulthood, and we don't just experience them in adult language.
Right. And by using rhyme, Cullen is saying to us, children are not responsible for the racist hatred of their parents and of their elders. And if rhyme is the means to speaking to the child's experience, then that's what we'll use, and never mind strategies that got rid of the rhyme that precede him. Yeah. Lily, I feel like you have something to say there. And then I want to turn to Erica for a comment on this at all. And then we're going to turn to a question from the forums about Hughes, which is relevant. Lily?
Or in his form choice, he could be saying, hey, we need to look carefully at what we're teaching our children, starting with nursery rhymes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you stopped before the second stanza of this poem, you know, you would miss, you know, if you're just lulled by the form and you're not really, like if you, you know, really, somebody posted about Mother Goose or, you know, fairy tales, and how if you really go back to original texts of those things, they're dark and scary, but we just repeat them because they're fun and silly.
Yeah.
So maybe he's saying something with his form choice about, like, maybe we should look really closely at the things we're using to teach children and not just pass on the same thing year after year without looking closer at it.
Old Baltimore with its perfect meter. Once riding in Old Baltimore. Old Baltimore represents an old way of saying it, and he's using the old way of saying it to shock us into forgetting momentarily the searing nature of hatred.
And he's also locating the hatred in that old form.
Right.
He's giving us the old form and revealing what's at its core.
This is really, really complicated, this strategy. Erica, your thought on this, and then I want to transition to a question about Langston Hughes.
Well, and you might have talked about this before I joined you guys, but the thing that's the most striking to me about this poem is, I think when I came on, you were talking about the December Remember rhyme. Yes. And I think that one of the things that the poem is doing through this nursery rhyme-like form is also reminding us that we don't know the things that are going to stick in kids' minds. And kind of like the weight that memory carries.
Yeah, really, really well put. All right, so Teresa Fraguada in the forum, in the Webcast forum, writes the following about Langston Hughes' poem "Dinner Guest Me," and I would like, Gabe, for Mary maybe to take a shot at this first. If that's all right, Mary, you're good with that? Okay, "Dinner Guest Me." Some of us want to grab it. The question for "Dinner Guest Me" that Teresa wants to ask boils down to this: who's the intended audience? Whoa. So, that's it. That's a big question. But I'll read the whole thing. In the meantime, I'm going to amp up the reason for calling us: 215-573-9752, 215-573-9752. The first caller is going to get a copy of Elizabeth Willis, Liz Willis's new and selected poems. This is a really good book. It's 2015. I have an extra copy. My copy is well read. This is an extra one for you if you call. And we will not give you the frog, the toad, because the toad is perennially run over by a lawnmower. Oh, poor toad.
It comes back every year.
But comes back every year. I ain't dead yet, says the toad. Ribbit, ribbit. Okay, where were we? Oh, yes, Teresa. I have been struggling with the implications of this poem in terms of its analysis when applied to, let's say, the video discussion itself. Whoa. This is also true for a larger social context, however. Both video groups, so she's referring to the TAs and me talking about the poem, and she's talking about the group that Julia convened, which was you, me, Erica Kaufman, and Kristen Gallagher, as teachers trying to grapple, particularly as white teachers, trying to grapple with a poem where audience is a big question. Okay, so those two videos she's talking about. Both video groups discuss the topic. The whole meta level has me enthralled. One of the questions I have come to recently, who was the intended audience? So Mary, that's so hard. Do you want to go second?
I'll give it a crack first.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that the intended audience immediately, as he's writing this poem, might have been some of Langston Hughes's own, perhaps his patron, who was a white woman who early in his career had been providing him with money and education, but who wanted him to retain some certain like aspects to his poetry that were that she saw as being like typically African American, and I think that in
other words, she was a patron who wanted him, go ahead and be black in your writing. That's what I want you to be, thus essentializing what he was.
Yes.
So it's very much a County Cullen problem, and yet do I marvel. But go ahead.
So I think that would be like one level, and then the other level.
Well, what's the audience there?
The audience there would be the specific people.
The patron.
The patron. And the other level is just I think it's just the third line in the poem, the white mind.
Mm.
So just, I mean, I know that that's a very simplistic answer to an extremely complex question, but right in the poem, it's addressing the white mind.
Yeah. Julia, your thought about this?
Yeah, I'm interested in the word intended, and it seems to me the poem has an intent and it has an argument at its heart, and it's necessarily variegated enough to reach these different audiences. And there's a deep satire or deep irony to the poem, and it's very biting. And I think that it's delivering to any number of audiences actually. But I'm curious about why we're called to ask that question of poems. In other words, why it matters. I think it does matter, but I also think that's an interesting question, why it matters to us. Because then it helps us reflect on ourselves as readers.
There's a problem of address, right? Because all poems, especially first-person poems, seem to be speaking. The question is to whom. It doesn't have to be answered, but it seems like a natural question. For Sid Corman, the big debate was, is he talking to us as his readers who are, as long as we are, he is? Or is he talking about a person in his life, and it's a love poem, let's say? That question becomes crucial. Obviously, ModPo doesn't try to answer that question definitively, but it wants to hold out for the complicated possibility. Gee, I wonder if Allie or Dave Poplar or Molly have just wave a finger at me. Oh, Allie's unmuted. Allie, go ahead.
Oh, were you going to ask a specific leading question?
Well, the Dinner Guest Me poem is very complicated. Do you have the text in front of you? Do you want to think about audience?
I mean, I think one of the reasons why in this poem in particular that question is so urgent in our minds is because whoever is being addressed is also necessarily being implicated. And there's a very obvious implication of the white audience, but I also think that it's important that everyone involved in the poem is completely inertial. So Langston Hughes is still sitting there kind of playing his own part in the act. And so he doesn't really let anyone off the hook. And I think that's why, perhaps more than at least any of the poems we've seen so far, the question of who the addressee is is just so, like, we need to find out.
Yeah, a lot of the work we do with that poem is to figure out the address. And I'm not going to say anything more about this, but the question that was asked here by Teresa mentioned Claude McKay. I didn't read that part, but the Claude McKay poem that we talk about has the same problem. Who is being addressed? Oh, kinsman. And some people argue persuasively that that's a bit of a clever dodge because the poem seems to be addressed to the predominantly white canon-seeking audience reading this poem in an anthology because it's a sonnet, trying to reach out beyond the kinsman, but also addressing the kinsman. So this is one of the fundamental problems of that poem, which is why it's so strategically interesting. Anna Strong, we have someone on the phone. Who is it?
We do. It's Nancy Landy calling from Bozeman, Montana.
Wow, Nancy. Well, put her on. Thank you,
Yeah,
Anna.
she would like to ask a question about Dinner Guest Me. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And we have music coming from somewhere? Nancy, can you hear me? Maybe Nancy's just playing some music. Yeah. Nancy, can you hear me? This is spooky. It's like
Mercury retrograde.
this is a call from Pac-Man. Okay, I guess we lost Nancy. Well, that was interesting. I'm sure she will call back. What I want to do then is I want to play one other recording that we got from our voicemail. Is everybody okay?
I don't know. It was scary.
Poor Lily. Lily does not. Oh, that's probably her again.
Okay.
Lily does not like horror movies.
No, I don't.
This is the first ModPo horror movie. Yeah. Okay. Is that Nancy? Okay, great. Okay. Right. Hello, Nancy.
Hi, Al.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So you're 25 years in Philadelphia. Did it overlap with me? I came in 1985.
Yes, we were there from 75 until 98.
Great. So did we meet when you were here?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Well, retiring in Montana sounds great. You have a master's. You have a PhD. You've published 3 books. You're writing a lot of poems.
Yes.
And I believe that you got a note from the great poet Rachel Zoff this afternoon who wants to work with you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Read your email. And
Okay.
and Rachel, she's great. I mean, if you can work out an arrangement, that'll be helpful. But that's all beside the point. You wanted to talk about Hughes, I think.
Well, I wanted to talk about Hughes, and I wanted to ask the question I asked you apologetically.
About the line endings?
Yes.
Well, you know what? Can we choose one or the other? Because both would really throw us for a loop.
The line endings.
Okay, do the line
It's my
endings.
most critical question for
Okay.
all of the links to listening into the poems being read by the poets.
Yes.
And my question that I asked you that I'm really trying to understand deeply is why are there line breaks and why do the poets themselves or you and your company there read them as though they're sentences or read them as though they have pauses and phrases as opposed to line breaks? And I'm asking this as a writer and as a listener and reader to try to really figure out what does a line break mean.
All right. That's a great question, Nancy. And I think we're going to give you the answer. Oh, by the way, make sure that you give Anna your address because we're going to send you a book of Liz Willis's selected poems.
And she is a master of the line break.
And she, Liz Willis, is, say it again,
A master of the line break.
Oh,
she's a really good poet
wonderful.
to read for the line break.
she's a really good poet to read for everything. She's a fantastic poet. So this is just, you asked me today, what poet should I read? Well, here's one, and we're going to send this to you.
What's her name?
So make sure that Anna takes that address, and we're going to respond to you offline so somebody else can call
Okay,
again.
I need to get the name of the master of line break.
Elizabeth Willis, Willis.
Okay, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Nancy. Take
Bye.
care. What I'm going to do in response to Nancy's question is play a few seconds of Robert Frost reading Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall. And we're going to listen to line breaks, and then I'll ask anybody to respond to that question. So would you, Gabe, give the mic to Eric? And Caroline, is line breaks your thing, or should we go to somebody else?
That question really, I don't know.
Not your thing. Cool. Yeah. That's great. That's good to say. So I think we'll go to Dave Poplar and have him deal with it. But here's Robert Frost. Is Dave shaking his head? No, Dave?
Yeah, Dave was shaking his head because Dave wants to learn the answer to this question too.
Okay, good. I think we're gonna go to Julia on that. Yes. And so here it goes. Here goes Robert Frost running right past his lines.
That doesn't love a wall.
Wait, we got to get the beginning of that.
Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again.
And on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. You don't get any more iambic than that. And on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. There is no hesitation at the line ending. That's okay, right, Julia Block?
Except so then the question is, why is it in two lines? And one of the reasons it's in two lines is that we break after the word line, so the line is literally walking the line. It's walking itself.
Whoa, Julia Block.
And if you cram it all together,
it's a semantic form jive, right? Because the line is the issue about the wall.
Yeah, like the speaker is walking the line of the poem, and so we don't think of Frost as...
I set you up with that because
you did. Thank
that was
you.
The perfect one.
Thank you very much. See, Caroline, you could.
There's another reason you could have done that, Caroline.
No, but I thought we were talking. You know, we were going to talk about why do we have the line breaks and dinner guest me.
Well, I think it's the same question.
No. I told her she could ask one, but not both questions. The line ending question was about general things in general. The dinner guest me question we didn't take.
Okay, because that. Well.
But you want to do Hughes's line? Let's stay on Frost for a second.
No, I don't. That's the question I didn't.
Okay. All right. So look, so one of the reasons. So Julia gave a super amazing form content. And if I don't take this the wrong way, slick answer.
Yeah.
Really
well,
smart,
because the poem is slick.
Answer.
Actually, the poem's slick. I'm not slick.
Right. Okay. That was a good move too. That was slick in itself. But there's another reason, a grumpier reason is this guy is wedded to iambic pentameter, and the reason you change to the next line is you're done with the 5. And on a day we meet to walk the line. Iambic pentameter, Shakespeare, I'm just as good. And set the wall between us once again. Iambic pentameter. This could be Hamlet.
Well, an iambic pentameter is about breath, but Williams's line isn't in iambic pentameter, but it's also about breath.
He violates the thing that Nancy was worried about. It's Williams more than Frost.
Yeah.
Right? So Williams, the one that's famous for this is Between Walls, right?
Yeah, it's one sentence. Well,
I have to search for it. Control F. Between, oh gosh, there it is. Here it is. Listen to Williams.
Between walls, the back wings of the hospital, where nothing will grow, lie cinders in which shine the broken pieces of a green bottle.
You don't know from that performance where the lines break, Julia Block.
No,
correct?
And some of the lines are tiny. Of the
so we should
nothing,
be reading it as
cinders,
hospital where,
the broken. I mean, these are tiny lines.
Shine. He actually does that one right. So the answer to the question is the poets in performance do not often pay attention to the lineation. Not even Robert Creeley did. So really they're kind of in performance doing something different. Can we leave it at that? Is that unsatisfactory? Not really. Okay, Caroline. Do you want to try to do this with line breaks in the hues? Really?
No, she said that.
Oh, she
doesn't. She doesn't.
She doesn't. Okay.
That's a totally different.
Yeah. Eric? Got the mic?
Yeah. So obviously poets will perform their poems differently at different occasions, and some poets spend a lot of time working on the performance. Trisha Lowe, tremendous attention to the details of performance. Vanessa Redgrave came to the National Theatre to talk to actors about line breaks. And she talked about the difference between the intellectual line stop and the biological line stop. So she wanted actors to think about where their breath was every time they came to an end of a line, and where the end of a thought was every time they came to a full stop. And as they went through exercises, they found that it didn't always work. I mean, that was the general principle. I think contemporary poets are especially aware of where things don't quite work, at where things open up, at where possibility happens. Possibility is always waiting at the end of a line break, surprise, something possibly broken, or something conversely capable of attaching to things we might never suspect. So there's a lot of possibility in a line break, and each writer, I think, teaches you how to engage with their line breaks.
Thank you very much. Yes, somebody wants to, can we get the mic over to Michael? He's not sketching tonight, so he's thinking.
Finished.
Oh, you finished already?
I
Okay.
did the staff.
Oh, Ivana, you've been sketched.
You won't recognize yourself, don't worry. I just wanted to add something a little off the wall, but you think about Bob Dylan in his middle period, where you'd expect when there's music and rhythm behind you, you might be following along with the line breaks, but he doesn't. I call it, a lot of his concerts are the kamikaze style of delivering a line. Just throw it out there any which way at all. So just another variation on line breaks.
Yeah, well, songwriters really have to respect the line ending because it's a notation to themselves about when to pause, literally, so they're more into it. Let's play the other message that we picked out from the voicemail line, and this is from Ina. This is from Ina, who's from the Netherlands. And those of us who are in the forums a lot will recognize her. And while I'm doing this, Julie, will you take a look at Twitter and things happening in Twitter?
Yeah, we've got Colleen Knight, Karen Elenier, the Dick Whitmans is, who is that? Anyone know? Anyway, hello to the Dick Whitmans. I think they're
connected to ModPo Asheville in some way.
Okay, ModPo Asheville,
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah.
Ray Maxwell, no mistake that one sees a resemblance between Stein and the Harlem Renaissance poets. Her early writings were set in Harlem, and there's been a little side chat about Stein's writings in Harlem. Therese Pope is with us. Jeremy Dixon was here for a second, but then he had to go to bed.
Jeremy from Wales. Yeah, it's pretty late in Wales.
Yeah.
So let's just, before we play this thing, let's go to Ray. So Ray Maxwell has a thread called, "What might County Cullen really be teaching us?" And Ray does something very unorthodox with that poem. And I urge you to go to that thread, "What might County Cullen really be teaching us?" and engage. We won't really deal with all of it. I just wanted to quote something that Ray said and get some response from any of us. Ray does a pretty radical rereading. It doesn't look like his original reading 4 years ago in the first ModPo. He says basically says this is a poem that's not about race, and you'll see what he says. This is the key passage of what he says, and this is Yet Do I Marvel. He's talking about Yet Do I Marvel. This poem's central message, Ray says, can be summed up in 4 words: there is no God. It was a very revolutionary message for its time, and even for our time now. So revolutionary, in fact, that it required being buried in a sterile traditional form, the sonnet, and wrapped around a safe American tradition, mom, apple pie, the girl you left behind, and the Negro question, in parentheses, as race was referred to back in the day. Everything else is a footnote. Using the sonnet form to convey that message, hidden inside a race message, provides necessary camouflage and prophylactic protection, but is otherwise unremarkable. Wow. I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that, but I would urge everyone to go to that thread and engage with Ray and others. It's animated conversation about that. Okay, let's go to Ina from the Netherlands, and she's going to ask us about, I think she's going to ask about X.J. Kennedy's nude descending a staircase.
Can I interrupt her 1 second?
Yes.
Anthony Risser is the Dick Whitman.
Oh, right,
Anthony
Anthony,
Risser.
of course, Anthony. Hello, Anthony. Here we go.
Hello, this is Ina Schrodevedes from the Netherlands. I have a question about the poem Nude Descending a Staircase. I was wondering if Duchamp, his painting wasn't already a satire, and so this poem would be a satire on a satire, and therefore perhaps not understood very well, as it might be a bit too much to ask for a reader to understand why he was using this form and not a more free form. And I was also wondering if the perspective of the poem wasn't from the landing upstairs in the poem instead of downstairs, because the speaker is looking through the banister, and when you are downstairs and you are in front of the staircase, you don't see through the banister, you see everything coming down. Oh, my English is not very well, but I hope I made it clear what I was wondering about. And I also want to say I'm really enjoying the course. It is very nice and very professionally done. Thank you and bye.
That was great. I'll read the poem and then we can talk about it. This has probably been more of a cause for controversy in ModPo over the years than I expected when I put it in there, partly because it's a response to Duchamp, and it's and we kind of, in our video, we kind of go after it as a satire that's like a pro-neo-formalist satire. And people take exception to that, and maybe we can rehearse that argument here. So I'll just read the Kennedy. Nude Descending a Staircase is obviously coming after Duchamp's painting. Toe after toe, a snowing flesh, a gold of lemon, root and rind. She sifts in sunlight down the stairs with nothing on, nor on her mind. We spy beneath the banister a constant thresh of thigh on thigh. Her lips imprint the swinging air that parts to let her parts go by. One woman waterfall, she wears her slow descent like a long cape, and pausing on the final stair, collects her motions into shape. Anna Strong is making a mad face, and so what I want to do is go to Anna first, and you're going to stir it up, I'm sure, and then we'll go to Molly and Erica for a follow-up response. Okay, Anna, why are you so angry at X.J. Kennedy?
Because I guess the thing that has always really deeply bugged me about this poem is that what the Duchamp painting does is actually a radical unobjectification of the female nude form. That almost every painting pre-Duchamp was a highly objectified, very male gaze-y version of a female artistic nude. And what Duchamp actually does by doing this, radically fractured cubist version of that female nude descending the staircase, is he actually takes away the kind of sexual male gaze quality of it and instead makes it this incredible painting about motion and movement and dynamic form. The Kennedy poem actually just undoes all of that, like categorically, and remakes the radical, groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting painting into an incredibly traditional, objectified version of the nude descending the staircase.
And if it had been a poem, it was simply a new formalist poem about a painter's an artist's rendering of a woman coming down the stairs, but didn't have the title of the previous work, it would be hard to argue, or a little harder to argue, that it's a satire. But because it uses the same, it's clearly a counter argument of some kind. Lily, let's go to Molly and Erica, and then Lily, you can add something. Molly, your thoughts on this? Are you as up in arms as Anna Strong?
I'm not. My sort of reading of the poem is that X.J. Kennedy is saying Duchamp is not exempt from this male gaze issue, and that he sees Duchamp's attempts to to fracture this traditional view, this traditional objectification, as maybe ineffective, just because he's so explicit about the lips and the parts, and I guess I can't bring myself to think that he's not being ironic. X.J. Kennedy, that is.
Yeah, right. So we spy beneath the banister a constant thresh of thigh on thigh. That, what I would consider to be awful looking, I'm adding the editorial awful there. You're saying he's ironizing that. He is not that speaker. He's not in favor of such spying. He's satirizing it. That's what you're saying?
That's my reading, yeah.
Okay. Erica, what do you do with this thing?
I think I might be on Anna's team.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think
you
a
can't
lot
see
about,
it, but Anna is celebrating that you're on her team because she likes you and wants you to be on her team.
I mean, I agree. Like the painting was huge and hugely important, and what Duchamp accomplished in the painting was something that was pretty radical. And I feel like the thing that gets me about the poem is how rhythmically contained it is, like how dependent it is on the rhyme scheme and the meter.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the form of the poem in a lot of ways devalues any possible satire to me.
Mm-hmm. Lily?
I think for me, I understand. I like and understand Molly's reading, but I think for me, the part where he says nothing on, not on her mind is what
He's
puts me.
insulting her.
Yeah, but it just puts me a little more in Anna's camp that even if he was saying Duchamp wasn't as radical as people think he was, he didn't really do his critique with his poem because he's still only talking about her in a objectified way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like what I think is radical about Duchamp's work is that he doesn't let us see enough of the woman or even tell us that it is a woman, to let us make those kinds of assumptions, like she's dumb or she's, insert X thing you would think about a naked woman walking around here. So Duchamp doesn't, like, something, a radical intervention is like he doesn't let you do that. Like he doesn't let you see this like beautiful woman reclining on a couch eating grapes and think like, oh, she must be so rich and she's so beautiful, the way like a traditional nude would. Whereas the poem makes all of those assumptions right away and doesn't do any of the radicals.
What I had intended in putting this in ModPo was to take the modernist earnestness and sincerity which you get in the Duchamp. Duchamp is a Dadaist gag guy. I mean, he makes a lot of Dadaist jokes. But in that piece, I think he's being very serious about the innovation. Mm-hmm. And Kennedy later in this Augustan period, this period of satire, the 50s, where there's a rolling back of modernism, a deliberate rolling back of modernism, is making a wisecrack here, saying that because she wears nothing, she's got nothing on, she's nude descending a staircase. Chris, can you bring me up in the room just a little? Nude descending a staircase, she's got nothing on, and then he goes ahead and says, nothing on her mind, ha ha ha. Because she's naked, she must be a bimbo, she must be stupid. So this doesn't really respect the tradition of women in portraiture, to be sure, but the participation of women who are the object of artists' renderings, just leaving that aside, but it also just makes a joke. I don't think it's like, I think it is a satire. It's a satire of modernism's attempt to break down the subject-object dominance.
It's kind of just saying like, duh, let her be a hot lady. She's a hot
Why
lady.
can't she's beautiful? And Ina from the Netherlands said, she's challenging our idea that the subject position of Kennedy here is looking up, right? Looking up, and she's wondering, well, maybe you can. I mean, she thought about it. Ina did, and maybe you can see her from the banister. I mean, I don't really ultimately care. I think Ina's probably got a reasonable case there, but there's a constant thresh of thigh on thigh beneath the banister. So it strikes me as a looking up, which is a very, when someone's coming down the stairs and you're below, you would think that higher has dominance over lower, but actually lower, because it's looking up, has a kind of dominance. And the poem thinks that's hilarious. I'm being much too puritanical about this, but am I being too puritanical?
No. But I wanted to mention that Colleen Knight posted this question: can we please talk about doubt with a capital D for the Week 5 Poems and Poets? And I think doubt in this case it's satire, and it's a reaction specific to the 1950s against modernist form.
Right.
And maybe the reason we use the word doubt and not just rejection or
doubts about modernism.
Attack is that there's a central doubt at work that these formal experiments that came before the 50s are doing anything of use, are accomplishing what they set out to do.
That's so great. And we're going to go to the phone. I'm glad you brought that up, because Week 5 is a series of versions of concerns and doubts, and modernism should create doubts. William Carlos Williams must create doubts. Is Portrait of a Lady really self-conscious enough about Williams' apparent misogyny in that poem?
Yeah,
no. I mean, some of us would say no, but the self-conscious is there. There's no self-consciousness here, I think. So doubts about modernism are doubts healthy. So in Chapter 3, the Communist Poets, the doubts add up to, does anybody want to say? This is quick. Anybody want to say? Dave, what are the Communist Poets doubting about the modernists? You're on the spot. He's still muted. Here he comes. I'm putting you on the spot. Chapter 3, the Communist Poets, what are their doubts about modernism?
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Caroline?
Their ability to reach the common folk in a large audience.
Yeah. Can we get a mass audience? Can we talk about content? What happened to content? People are being evicted from their houses. People are unable to vote in the South. There's a depression. There's fascism on the rise in Europe. Gertrude, your poems don't tell us what to do about that, and it's an urgent situation, so radical politics. Okay, Chapter 4, the Harlem Renaissance, doubts about modernism. Well, we already talked about several of these poems. Anybody want to summarize what those doubts are? Gabe, you've got the mic. Uh-oh, he wasn't paying attention. That's all right. Anybody? Carlos, what are doubts? What are going to be the doubts?
I can take a shot.
Please.
This might not be what you're looking for, but
I'm not looking for doubts.
I think it could be a doubt about what's it called? Authority, almost in a way, of who gets to say what. And so they're being doubtful about modernism in their content. They're choosing to be modern or radical in the things that they talk about, race, and who's getting to speak in these poems, rather than the modernists who are being more radical in their form.
Okay, so that makes Chapter 4 a little like Chapter 3, and in a way in which Chapter 4 is not like Chapter 3 is to say, wait, when you throw out all the forms, you lose some political strategies that we can use, such as with the ballad and with the sonnet. Okay, Robert Frost, coming from the right, is doubting modernism. How? In Mending Wall. Anna Strong?
That once you throw out the traditional form, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
But in Mending Wall, how is he expressing doubt about modernism?
He's worried about the maybe like radical democracy that we would say Whitman would want. Like he's worried that if poetry becomes more accessible even to my dumb neighbor, like what's the world going to be?
What's the world going to be? We're going to lose our walls. We're going to lose our property, private property. But also, what's going to happen? If everybody is a subject, then the wall between us gets taken down. Free verse is like playing tennis without a net. Chaos. Right? And this poem is like taking the wall down, is like taking the net down. Who the hell's going to be a winner and a loser? who's going to be a subject and an object. So it's brilliant in its conservatism, I think, and he's very nervous about the consequences of the Whitmanian, the way in which modernism took Whitman. And then chapter 6, this is sort of this is a quick overview of week 5. And chapter 6, we have satires in the 50s. So these are Cold War era satires. The return to traditional form is the return to art, to traditions, to stability. It's kind of like a cultural conservatism. Okay, so that's your little. So those are concerns, and I think that the concern about concern that was raised by Colleen from Canada, doubt, was. Concern can be skepticism, it can be satire, it can be an alliance with modernism, as in the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah, and things like, increasingly we're understanding that modernism encompassed movements like Harlem Renaissance, and we need to recognize movements like that as modernism.
So week 5 is an attempt to dispute modernism from the cleverness of Frost's cultural conservatism, or from the outright cultural conservatism of the 50s writers, or it can be an urge to expand the definition of what it is to include ethical urgency and political urgency. So this is a very complicated week, and there's a lot going on. Okay, we have someone on the phone, Anna.
We do. We have Stephen Martin calling, currently from Texas.
All right, great. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can, Al.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be able to call in and talk to you guys. I'm a truck driver, so most of the time I'm watching the live cast because I'm driving. But right now I'm not driving, so I just kind of had the opportunity to call in.
That's great. Are you saying that you're watching the webcasts while you're driving a truck?
No, when I'm usually when the webcast is going on, I'm not available because I'm driving.
Okay, so you watch a recording.
Watch them at a later time.
Okay, thank you. No, really appreciate knowing that. In case I'm driving in Texas one day. This is great. Thank you for calling. Is this your first year in ModPo?
Yes, it is.
Great.
I'm really enjoying it.
What do you think? Is it too much work? Are you tired of us in these videos?
No, it's something for me to do when I have downtime. I love this stuff, so it's just. For me, it's just fun.
Oh, that's great. I think this call just is gratifying because we're here at a prestigious university, and typically we're just teaching students who have come through the gates, who figured out a way for someone to pay the tuition, and they're generationally homogenous and otherwise, and they're great, right? There's a couple of them in the room. They're great. Don't get me wrong, but to be able to talk with you under the auspices of the University of Pennsylvania is, for me, a privilege. One other question about ModPo. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have something I wanted to ask you guys.
Please.
Well, this week's kind of going back to, modernism kind of versus the traditional form. And one thing I've kind of thought about a lot during the week is whether that actually has more to do with the writers than the argument. And why I say that is because when I read Stein, you can feel the enjoyment she gets from writing in the free way that she does.
Yeah.
But I get the same thing when I read Frost. It's when he's writing it, and he's writing in a more traditional form, you could tell he's just really enjoying it.
Yes.
And another little thing that kind of jumped off the page at me in the Mending Wall poem when he says elves, that almost seems a little Whitmanian to me. So it's almost like Frost isn't completely against freeform, but it's just not his thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good characterization of it. Frost is very, very playful. I want to ask, do you remember the poem by Richard Wilbur, The Death of a Toad?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the humor in that. He's obviously having a good time. I guess my problem with it is that he's having a good time at the expense of a tiny little defenseless animal.
I guess, but when I read that poem, the lawn becomes as big of a character for me as the animal does. And
do you have a
so-
lawn that you have to mow occasionally?
No, I'm a truck driver, so my wife hires somebody else to do that, and I'm never around.
You're a pavement guy, not a lawn guy.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, okay, but why is the lawn a character? I'm intrigued. This is great.
Well, you know, at the very end, it talks about the castrate lawn, and throughout the poem, the toad is moving around the lawn. It starts with him mowing the lawn,
Right.
and for me, the lawn is almost like kind of symbolizing where he is. You know, the guy mowing the lawn is symbolized in the lawn itself, and just that life, that suburban life.
Yeah.
And I think that the tone of having, you know, coming across with so much just playfulness and just, you know, raw imagery is kind of playing on that. And I don't know, it's kind of playing on the fact that the lawn itself and the toad in the lawn is kind of representing him, and it just really worked for me. I got a lot out of it.
Yeah. That's great. So we're going to respond to this. Why don't you hang up and listen? But thank you so much for being. It's Stephen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being part of ModPo, and I hope you'll drive safely and keep up with us.
Definitely.
Great. Thank you for calling.
Yes. Thanks.
That was great. So, what about this toad? This is a frog, by the way, not a toad, but whatever. What about this?
Well,
Lily?
I like what Steven said about the lawn character, because it really, like, the poem is really about man versus lawn, and then like the toad got in the way, kind of, and then
How dare he get in there?
it's sort of this like thing that makes him ponder a dark aspect of his existence that he hasn't really maybe always been thinking about, is like this.
What I find really clever about this poem is that he invents a stanza form. So he sounds traditional. A toad the power mower caught. He's got all the high poetic inversion there. And he invents a look and a stanza completely out of whole cloth. So he sounds like a traditionalist, but he's being very inventive. And he's doing it in the ultimate artificial scenario, the suburban lawn mowing of the 50s. So that's pretty clever, I would say.
Which is itself its own weird formal tradition, like
It is itself.
because you know every Sunday or whatever you go and mow the lawn.
I mean, what I said in the and I guess I'd like to ask Amaris maybe to respond to what I'm about to say if she likes. What I said in the video, and I've said many times since, is that Wilbur is using his considerable poetic talents and metrical and stanzaic skills on what you would call small game. He's kind of overdoing it, and it strikes me as showing off. Just to do all that for this toad, and he makes it into some mock heroic mythic scene of this guy going to lost amphibious emperies. It's just he's having a go at the whole thing because he's basically proving his poetic prowess. Seems to me that the modernists are more serious than this, but I think they would want, certainly Williams would want to deal with a seriously large game or a seriously large object of observation and not play around with something so small. Maurice, what do you think of that? Am I being unfair?
Well, I think his sort of over-the-top language of sort of this epic face-off kind of is what Lily was saying, taking this very mundane experience of running over a toad with his lawnmower adds to the humor of the poem. It just inspires it with that sort of mocking tone. And it's just taking, I guess, a short anecdote from his life and using it to be representative of being caught in suburbia.
Does anybody want to say, and then we're going to go around and wrap up with final words, does anybody want to say, does this poem belong in a chapter that is about mid-century formalism and the rolling back of modernism? Does anybody want to see how that, say how that works?
Actually, I've got a tweet that kind of says that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I love this. Terry Talty just tweeted.
Terry.
Yeah. The idea that the seed is cut from every one of the blades of grass, the castration, is anti-Whitmanian and creepy.
Wow.
Which is
Terry.
Such a phenomenal tweet,
Yeah.
first of all, but second of all, like.
Yeah, she used up all those characters.
Such a fantastic tweet.
Anti-Whitmanian.
But I love that.
That's
like,
right, because
here
this
we
is
are.
the grass.
This
This
is
is the leaves of grass, and he's castrating the leaves of grass,
Dang it, Wilbur, leave us our leaves of grass.
and leaving us our toads.
Come on.
Ribbit. Yeah, anti-Whitmanian. Yeah. Anybody want to add to that?
Well, go ahead. Oh, just thinking about the suburbs and like Williams standing in sort of for a lot of modernism in our course, I think.
And a guy nearby in the suburbs.
Yeah, is like the king of the suburbs, but like, well, Williams is like dancing naked in his room and ignoring his wife and baby. Wilbur is like smoking a cigarette,
taking it all out on the toads.
and like destroying a toad. So it's not that like modernism can't come to the suburbs. It's just about like attitude, maybe.
Well, and
Dave wants to say something. Dave Poplar, will you add something? And then Eric, somebody else? Yeah, Kirby, and then we're going to wrap up. Dave?
I just need to stick up for Richard Wilbur here. I don't think he's showing off or having. I mean, I think he's sort of showing that by using this form and making this epic poem out of this small event, I think he's sort of showing that art is really artifice. And Cottage Street 1953, which is in ModPo Plus, which is still one of my favorite poems. What I love so much about that is that he's using very strict formal form, but showing that he himself is really impotent, and in a sense he's just showing art is art. It's not that he's trying to put himself above everything. I think he's really self-effacing in a lot of this.
So maybe he's the rollback in him and X.J. Kennedy is saying, modernism, you guys are full of genius and you have these great claims, but actually it's just a poem. Take it down a notch. Maybe there's a little bit of that. Kirby, do you have the microphone? Yeah, let's go to Kirby, and then we're going to go around for final words and wrap up.
I was struck by the grass being castrated and that morphing into the castrated suburban male. There was something about that image that struck me as maybe the laughter in his, or the laughter in the poem finally winds up being suburban impotence.
Very interesting. Okay, so we're going to get final words on week 5. Next week it's the beats. So we're doing the same period as chapter 6, the end of week 5, same period, but now we're going to the side of writers who are trying to break through cultural conservatism, going back to Walt Whitman in terms of form, and so on. So we're going to get, so put on your turtlenecks and your berets. And I know it's a spoiler alert, but when you tune into next week's, yes, Gabe's already started. Get the camera on, Gabe, please. Gabe's ready for the beats. The lost mind, the great mind of his generation. Stark, hysterical, naked. No, turtlenecked. Yeah, the beats next week, and it's a spoiler alert here, but we're all wearing black in the videos next week. Except for Max, who's wearing a red beret, I believe. Yeah, so I ruined the surprise. Okay, so final words. We're going to go around to everybody here, and let's start with Caroline at the table. Anything you want to say, make it brief, but some point that we should have made here that you really want not to go unsaid.
Definitely Melvin Tolson's Harlem Gallery. For those who want to continue exploring modernists are interested in Harlem Renaissance or African American modernism, I would definitely explore that poem.
Good, terrific recommendation. Carlos, final thought?
Sure.
Nice and close to the mic. Yep.
Right, I keep forgetting I'm new at this.
That excuse is going to wear out after a while.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, one thing I liked about this week was sort of the discourse between poets, and that you had poets interacting with each other, which I think is nice. And then also, real briefly, looking at, somebody touched on, I can't remember his name, but the truck driver.
Yeah, I think Stephen.
Stephen. He touched on the idea that a poet would be writing a certain way because they liked writing this way. And I like the idea that a poet won't necessarily just choose a form because it responds to a movement or responds to another poet, like I said, or fits their intended message of the poem, but because it resonates with their own voice, and that poetry can be a way of finding a way to express your specific voice, not just through what you say, but through how you say it on the page.
Very well put. Thank you, Carlos. We're going to go to the Google Hangouts and then continue around the circle here. So, Ali Castleman, any final words?
Yeah, I want to go back to the very beginning of the webcast when there was a question, or I forget if it was a question or just a comment, linking Stein to Incident. And that's a pairing that I never really spent a lot of time with. But I think it's pretty illuminating to look at Incident next to Stein, because Stein's whole thing is divorcing words from their connotations. And I think Incident is a really important, just really affecting example of an assertion that you can't always divorce words from their history and their baggage in terms of how they interact with human life and human history. So that was just something that struck me that's never struck me before about that poem.
Great. Thank you, Ali, and thanks for joining us tonight. And thank your colleague behind you there. She obviously is not getting a lot of work done because she's dealing with toads and Neodata.
She left, but she's a poet herself. You guys should check out Morgan Parker.
Wow. Say that name again.
Morgan Parker.
Morgan Parker. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. The difference is spreading. I'm Maurice Kachansky in Cape Cod. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite poems that we added in ModPo Plus, and which we unfortunately didn't get to talk about in this webcast, is Boy Breaking Glass.
Glass, yeah.
By Gwendolyn Brooks, and it has the very evocative and poignant first line, "Whose broken window is a cry of art." So if you haven't gotten to it, highly, highly recommend that you go over and spend time.
Great. Thank you for reminding us of that. That's a great poem. Dave Poplar?
Just a quick observation, sort of echoes what Ali and Carlos were saying, but about County Cullen's Incident and using that form, just contrast that with Yet Do I Marvel by County Cullen, which has such a drastically different, over-the-top, highly wrought form, and I think it just shows attempts to really, really put form to use.
Great, thank you, Dave. Anna, you can take the call. We'll just say goodbye to whoever it is. Erica Kaufman, final thoughts?
I would second Maurice's reminder about Boy Breaking Glass. And also, I think instead of final thoughts, I wanted to make two very quick plugs. One is we can keep talking about this stuff. I have office hours in 45 minutes. And two is everyone, if you're teachers, especially, we have a new ModPo teacher list feature up on the For Teachers part of the course.
Uh-oh, Erica, you froze.
And I'm thinking about this now because some of the poems that we deal with this week are some of my most favorite poems to teach.
Great. So just to repeat that plug, if you go to the left side menu of any ModPo page, click on For Teachers and explore it. If you are a teacher, or if you're a teacher in training, or if you're a student of a teacher who's using ModPo, it's open to anybody. Go in there and explore. We're adding lots of materials. And Angie and Caroline, who are our teaching fellows, are working hard with Erica and Julia and adding new things. And we really want ModPo in the coming years to emerge as a place that's a support for teachers as well as learners. So thank you, Erica, for that plug. Okay, Anna Strong, who's on the phone? And then this is going to be quick, and then you get to say your final word. Who's on the phone?
It is going to be quick because it's Ray Maxwell.
It's Ray. So we're going. Ray Maxwell, how are you?
How are you? Hi, everybody.
Hi,
yeah,
Ray.
we're great. So what's the thing with your hand? You were in the hospital the other day.
I fell. It's a kind of a weird story, but I fell, and I broke my wrist. It was a kind of an out-of-body experience, but it was really kind of it was painful, and it remains painful.
Wow. I guess so. Reading poetry is not like playing tennis. You don't have to use that hand really, so that's good.
That's right.
Anyway, Ray, we're doing final words. Do you have a final word for us?
Yeah, I have a final word. Thanks for the shout out on my piece on County Cullen. My final word, I think, in particularly on week 5 is that a big part of week 5 is relaxing assumptions that we have about identities of writers, whether it's racial identity or sexual identity or political identity. And once I think the doubts about modernism are partly wrapped up in those identities that we just have rigid structures of inside our brains.
That's really well said. Thank you, Ray. Great. Your timing was just fantastic. I don't have a book to give you, but hugs and kisses. Get well, Ray. We want you up here soon. Can you get up here sometime? Say hello to us again.
If I keep on staying out of work because of my broken hand, I might be able to make it up, but then I have to worry about, Well,
and you can really hang out with us. Great. You're always welcome, Ray Maxwell. Great to have you as part of the family here and your job as a CTA. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
Good night. Anna Strong, final word?
I just want to plug how incredibly impressed I've been with the meetups calendar that Zach and I have worked on putting together. So
you're impressed by your and Zach's own work?
No. I'm impressed by all the people who are making it the thing that we hoped it would be.
Yes,
you know?
I know. I'm teasing you.
I know.
Yeah. So was there a meetup last night in Chicago?
There was. Max McKenna hosted a wonderful meetup. He sent me some pictures just before the webcast started, and it really looked like a good time.
Yep.
We've got a bunch coming up. There's one in Michigan. There's one in Indiana. I
Northern
believe
California.
our own Eric is hosting one this evening right after this.
Eric is hosting one here.
Yep.
There's a Northern California one, a Silicon Valley one.
Yep.
There's an Africa group I think it's in Southern Africa that's trying to get together, and there's a group trying to get together in the UK.
So it's just incredible
Yeah.
for those of you who take this on, and it makes me so warm and fuzzy that there's people out there who want to actually get together in person and talk
Great.
about this stuff. So yay,
Fantastic.
thank you.
Thank you. Lily, final thought?
Yeah, just thinking about doubt this week, and it's funny because, well, I guess I wanted just a word of encouragement. Like, if you got to this point and you feel like some of your own doubts are mirrored in the doubts of the people who are on the syllabus for their doubts of modernism, it's okay. Like, that doesn't mean that we don't like you or something. Like, you're allowed to express those doubts even if they're the same as the people who were sort of holding up and looking at because of their doubts, and just to keep on being honest with us with your how you're reacting to the poems, and talk to us about doubts. You're allowed to have them. So
Right. You and I had a conversation like this today. We want to be passionate and strident about the ideas that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough confidence in this community to say what we think about one poem or another, so that people should feel like they can say, this is not a message coming from Olympus, just because the people around the table at the Writers' House said so.
Yeah.
All right? And, I'm going to just shout out to CJ here, who is really working hard through the philosophical aspects of this work and asking questions of the sort that we haven't been asked before, right? And I hope you feel like there's response coming.
Yeah, CJ and I had a heck of an office hour today, didn't we, CJ?
So this
Put
is
me
what
through my
this is
paces.
what it's about, and we made these contentions with the idea being that we're not going to turn away from you when you respond to them. So I know that's a version of what Lily just said. So thank you, Julia Block. Final word.
Layla Hughes posted on the discussion forum about failure. She says, in this week we've read a lot of poetry which is intended to inspire action. If the intended action was never achieved, does that mean the poetry was a failure? And I think to answer that, I want to go back to what Ray just said on the phone about how a lot of this changed, a lot of the change that a lot of the poems we're looking at, including a lot of the poems for this week, effect happens incrementally, it happens discursively, but there's a really important question there about why poetic form is important and what's socially relevant and urgent about it. And I hope that we'll continue to explore that.
And even if the poets disagree with each other about the means to the end of a better world where poetry can make a difference, they're in dialogue with each other. They're always in dialogue with each other. I mean, the one thing ModPo features, as has been pointed out, is a series of poets who are in dialogue with each other. They are engaging with each other. There's nobody who's standing alone saying, I'm just doing this because I want to write a beautiful poem and not thinking about everybody else who's around them. All right, 3 shout-outs for me to end up. Elena Katsaliti, I believe she's from Greece. She speaks for so many people who are afraid of writing the essays. It's so hard, especially if English is your second language. Brave people from around the world are writing these essays on this difficult poetry in English. And this is what Elena says as in the Facebook group as a response to this. There is something sweet in the terrifying procedure of writing an essay about poetry and let other anonymous people review your piece. You rely on their honesty and kindness while you expose your inner self through the noblest of means, to my opinion, through writing. This is the second time I enrolled in ModPo courses, but the first I submitted anything written. In other words, she hasn't written before. I am so happy that I'm doing this, the ethereal Dickinsonian this, she says. And I would like to thank all of you for giving the opportunity to non-native English speakers to participate. I mean, she says it perfectly well. We really want you to try that terrifying thing, and we're trying to make it not so terrifying. My second shout-out is to Jean Lombier and Lindsay Consdorf. What happened is, in a thread that's called Cultural Appropriation Reversed, which I recommend you look at, in the middle of this thread, unrelated to the thread topic, Jean Lombier talks about something that I said about the sonnet, and she says thumbs down to what Al said. She didn't like what I said. I like sonnets. I've written sonnets. My students have written, etc., etc. It's not the form that makes the poem, at least in the case of the sonnet. And then I wrote something, Jean, yes, indeed, I meant to refer, and I was like trying to apologize. And then Jean said, I'm honored by your reply. ModPo is a wonderful mind stretcher. And then someone named Lindsay Consdorf shows up in the thread. She says, a bit off topic, Jean, but did you happen to teach in the south suburbs of Chicago? I think I had a Ms. Lombier at Sandburg High School, but it may have been just a similar name. Jean Lombier writes, it is I, as the English teacher said. What a lovely small world. You can't imagine how happy I am to have you still interested in poetry. Was Consdorf your maiden name, Lindsay? Etc., etc. Mandana Chaffa couldn't help herself. She says, this is so cool. Then Lindsay comes back and says, it was Anderson my name was when I was either in your freshman or sophomore honors English class. It would have been around 1998. And I am definitely glad to be back looking at poetry. I teach chemistry now. So this is a very underused part of my brain that I'm glad to be stretching again. What a small world. Jean Lombier, 4 hours ago. Yay for teaching chemistry. This is so impressive. Don't you love MOOCs? Anything can happen. You students convinced me that the world would be in good hands in the future, and here is the future, and here you are doing important work. Teachers and students, and in this case a student who became a teacher, meeting each other in ModPo. I'm honored to be part of the platform that allowed that. And finally, a shout out to Susanna Pereira, who's a much admired person in ModPo, who is in Lisbon, in Portugal. And she notes that she's not going to be able to join the webcast, or she missed the last one, I think she's saying. But she notes that she had a PTA meeting there in Portugal, Parent Teachers Association meeting. So she's got kids, I guess, in school. And this was the point. She said it was equal parts fraught, important, and deadly dull. So instead of doing her ModPo that evening, she was in a PTA meeting. I kept thinking of you and of ModPo, not because I was escaping into poetry, though that's certainly a useful trick in a boring meeting, but because of how I have learned to listen to handle differences, to respond carefully, to collaborate. So I treated everyone that little bit much better, and I was happier for it too. Thank you. So I know it's overstating to say these kinds of things, but I like to think that ModPo is a global forum in which people can learn how to read carefully, listen carefully, and deal with each other in this space. So more power to us. The beats are coming next. Thank you to people who are here tonight. Allison, Michelle, thanks for coming along. Michelle, that was crazy, wasn't it? Weird thing. She loves it. Michael, Kirby, John, Talia, Mary, Erica. Ivana, thank you. How was it? Was it fun doing this crazy thing? Yeah? Cool? Oh, we'd like that. Chris Martin, Zach Hardner, thank you very much. Caroline, great to see you. Thanks for all you're doing as a teaching fellow. Carlos, good to see you as always. Lily Applebaum, you're the best. Erica Kaufman, thank you so much. Dave Poplar, good night to you. Amaris Kachansky, got to get to sleep early because you got all those kids you got to teach French to in the morning. Allie Castleman, you're at work late. We appreciate you doing that. Julia Block, as ever, thank you for collaborating on this.
Thank you.
And good night, everybody, from the Kelly. Oh, and Anna Strong for taking, and Gabe for carrying the mic around. And to all of those of you who are home, I hope you will have a little tip of a drink. Or a little cheese and bread, because we are here at the Writers' House going to gather together and do that. We're sorry you can't join us, but we'll see you next week for a live webcast. And please do the peer reviews. Please review your peers' essays. Please try to do at least 4. Thank you and good night. Thank you very much, guys. Please come have a snack with us.